Hello, my name is Christine Mormon, and I'm part of the marketing area here at the Fuqua School of Business. And today I'm going to present to you some of the recent results from the CMO survey, which I founded and run here from Fuqua. Fuqua faculty do these types of LinkedIn series the first and third Wednesdays of each month at 12:30. So we welcome you to join other professors as they share their research activities with you. So what I'm going to do is share some of these results with you, but I would like to have you provide questions throughout just to keep it interesting and engaging for you. So when a question arises, go ahead and submit that, and then we'll get those answered. Okay, and you can leave those in the comments section. So I have some slides which I'd like to go ahead and share with you now. And okay, so again, there's a lot of different aspects of the report that I'll share with you, but let me just first overview the fact that this is a broad sample of senior marketing professors, and we've been doing this survey, I should mention, since 2008. And so that's one of the nice things, is that we can see trends over time, which I'll point to in several areas. But this particular survey we ran in August, and there were 282 senior marketing leaders that responded across a variety of sectors. So you can see the sectors that are listed up here broadly in terms of economic sectors, but then more specifically in terms of industry sectors. If you're interested in any of the results that I'm going to share with you today for your sector, say, for example, healthcare or retail, you can look at cmosurvey.org, which is the location where all of the results are housed over time. And one of the reports breaks all of these results out by sector. I won't get into a lot of those sector level results because, of course, it's very specific, but know that those are there for you to use as benchmarks, which is the way that most marketing leaders use these reports. So the survey covers a broad array of important marketing questions and topics. This is a full list of what was covered in this most recent 27th edition. I'm going to pluck off a few of these topics that I think might be novel and interesting for you to learn about today. But know that if you're interested, for example, in metrics, for example, even though I'll just present one slide, you can see the full array of slides if you look at the report that I'm presenting today. Okay. So one of the topics that I did want to talk with you about is the digital marketing transformation. This is a topic, of course, that's really become incredibly important in general, but also due to COVID. Pandemic has really hastened companies' shift towards digital marketing, and it became literally a necessity, which was probably a good thing because companies learned fast and moved ahead. But as you'll see, perhaps not as far as we would like them to go, and there are still many, many gaps in the way in which they're approaching this. So just to sort of first point out exactly where firms are on this journey. In this most recent survey, we asked, where are you now and where were you a year ago, just so we could see sort of get a time-based view of that transformation. And what you can see is that companies have definitely made progress over a year ago. So if you compare the blue lines to the purple lines, companies have clearly made progress. But what's I think concerning is that if you look at the blue lines under both nascent and emerging, there we have 76% of companies still report themselves to be in the nascent. I'm sorry, no, we should be adding up the nascent purple and the emerging purple, which is about 60%, still a very large number of companies that are still more at the early stage. What we're striving for is that these digital activities become fully integrated across the company, that they become institutionalized, if you will. We don't want these things we want to turn into capabilities. And so that's really the objective. And they can't do that if people are still trying to figure out what to do or how to integrate these across different areas of the firm. So there still is progress to be made in this area. When we look at marketers' role in this transformation, they do play an important role, which is why I think in an earlier post that I had from the CMO survey results last year, I talked about the pandemic as really kind of a red carpet moment for marketing, meaning marketing was called on in a lot of respects. And I think the role that they've played in these digital marketing transformations is a sign of that. And there's, of course, differences across some of the companies, et cetera. But I think that overarching result is really very important. I just want to present a few more specific results here. This is one that I would normally have in a different part of the results, but I report, but I pulled it into this digital section. So what we see is that this dramatic shift towards mobile, which is part of the digital transformation. Companies are currently spending about 18.4% of their marketing budgets on mobile. That's expected to rise to 23%, and then over the next 5 years to be fully a third of marketing budgets. Now that varies quite a lot, as you can see by the economic sectors. I kept those in there so that you could see that B2C companies are driving that big lift. And also for them, that lift in the next year isn't just 23, it's 38 or 32%, depending on if you're B2C product or B2C services. So big lifts in this area. At the same time, what's interesting is that when we asked to what degree has the use of mobile marketing contributed to your company's performance during the last year, we see, and we've seen this pretty consistently, that marketers are spending more, but they're not necessarily getting the returns. So on a 7-point scale where 1 is not at all and 7 is very highly, you can see that marketers, fully more than a quarter of them report not at all, which is really disturbing. But the means overall, which are reported there in the box at the top of the graph, are still too low. 3.1, 3.3. For that amount of spending, we'd like to see higher numbers there. Now, B2C companies are getting those returns at a higher level than the B2B companies, but nevertheless, there's still opportunity for growth here to make digital much deeper part of how the firm achieves competitive advantage. And when we asked companies, basically, what are you spending on in your digital marketing investments? What you see there on the left, or I guess I'm not sure if it's the left or the right for you because I'm seeing a mirror image, but what you can see is that the dominant focus is the optimization of the company website, which, to be honest, seems more like table stakes at this point. Underneath that, we see some of these more strategic activities like digital media and search, data analytics, direct digital marketing, and MarTech systems and platforms. All those numbers we'd like to see closer to that 77%. We'd like to see companies investing in those because that's really where the strategy is. It's not just getting the website great for customers, which we need to do. But again, that we need to go beyond that and really bring these systems, these analytics systems in particular, into the foreground, and improving the app, which is a very small number there at 18.4%. So most companies are not investing in improving their app, which is probably contributing to some degree to the mobile which is really one of the things that, in addition to machine learning and automation, that the digital world can facilitate, are still too low. Privacy, that's a topic for a whole nother talk that we can have, but that's also very low. And so I think the key thing here that I wanted to point out is that there is big opportunity to spend in these areas where the company can really leverage the digital to drive decisions, to attract customers, to maintain relationships with customers, et cetera. And one other indication of the fact that marketers are still very early in this journey is when we ask them to report on the degree to which they're using artificial intelligence and machine learning in their in optimizing and automating their marketing efforts. This is, of course, the main benefit of using AI and machine learning. And so what we discover is that companies are doing this only about 12% of the time, which means there's a big opportunity to not only become more efficient, which AI and machine learning can help us with, but also to be more effective, to drive decisions in the direction of effectiveness. So that number is expected to rise to 38%, probably still too low in 3 years. These numbers are really going to take off. That's my expectation. So we'll be watching this over time. But these are some of sort of where firms are in this digital journey, but also some of these opportunities that we see for firms to improve. Okay, let's look then at marketing spending and returns. This is one of the topics that was promoted in the title. And we have a couple of key results here. One was to look at budgeting. So what we asked is basically to check the category that best describes how your company's marketing budget is set. And so there's 4 categories that you see up there, and the most dominant is that budgets are set on a yearly basis, and then they're adjusted. Um, and and so I think what we can see from this is that companies are not revisiting marketing budgets very frequently. We see that with the 41%, but then also this very low 10% in terms of revisiting and resetting budgets either every month or every quarter. So I think what that means is that companies are not very agile with regard to their spending. And that's something that will ultimately affect marketing decision making in an important way. And if digital is going to become fully aligned with budgets, I think what we would expect to see that 10% will rise considerably, that there will be more, not real time, but more updated budgets as firms get metrics. And this is consistent with one of the results I'll show you in a minute, which is that many firms do not update their metrics very often. So the metrics aren't updated, therefore the budgets aren't reset or updated, which is, again, hindering the degree to which they can fully deal with and manage the digital activities within the organization. So here's a question from Susan. It's about attribution worked in finance, supporting marketing teams. Yeah, so this attribution is a big topic, and for those of you that aren't familiar with this, actually, Susan, let me come back to this because I'm going to talk about marketers, the difficulty that they have in assessing the impact of marketing. So this is right in line with that. So let me come back to that in just a minute. So when we think about marketing spending, one of the things that we know is that marketers will get a lot of pressure to prove the value of marketing, exactly what Susan has mentioned, and that is that it's expressed very nicely in this slide where we see that marketers feel increased pressure from the CFO at about 59% and the CFO 41%, less so the board. And those vary a little bit depending on the company sector that they're in, but nevertheless, there is increased pressure. There's always been pressure for marketing to perform, to sort of provide evidence of its impact, but we see that's increasing for many marketers, probably because spending is increasing. And so CEOs, CFOs, and boards want to know basically what they're getting for their dollar spent. So in this survey, we took a deeper dive into some of these behaviors that might be useful to marketers as they try to build the case for marketing spending. And some of the things that we saw marketers commonly doing that are really helpful is, first of all, building that business case. Secondly, setting reasonable expectations. And then also explaining their hypothesis, meaning what's their theory, if you will, about if I spend on X, what kind of outcome can I expect, whether it's engagement or attention, however that works. And some of the less common behaviors, which are really important, are, that marketers tend to maybe not build the business case for marketing spending based on financial returns. So they do it as you see on the most common behaviors, they do it in terms of connecting to the business priorities and strategies, but they do it less so in terms of the financial returns. They also are not as effective in showing the impact of marketing spending on more intermediate KPIs, things like customer lifetime value or brand equity, as a way to point to longer term profits. And then finally, running experiments. We saw that earlier, that was an area where marketing was not investing. I think only 40% of companies had invested in experimentation. So marketers often don't run experiments to make the case for the impact of marketing spending. And that makes it very difficult for attribution, because if you're running an experiment, which is kind of the gold standard for thinking about causality, you have a control group. You have a group that did not receive the marketing expenditure, or they received it at a later point. You can give it to them, but you need to have a period of time when they didn't receive it so that you can understand the impact. But without that control group, what do you compare your marketing spending to? You can compare it to what you were doing in the past, But that makes attribution very difficult. A clear pathway, and this gets a little bit to Susan's question, a clear pathway to attribution involves creating an experiment where you're manipulating, and you might do this in different regions. Like one region that's matched to another region on all of the characteristics gets the marketing expenditure, whereas another does not. And so experiments are one way, one very clear and easy way to get that attribution to marketing spend. A couple of other things in terms of marketers asking for budget within the organization. So a couple things that marketers agree are important and that we see them doing is challenging the degree to which the non-marketing leaders focus on the short-run effects of marketing spending. At its heart, marketing spending is a long-term investment for the company. And so, but often, financial leaders will want those short-term returns because they're having to deal with the stock market, which also has those short-term returns. So marketers need to be able to basically build a case to be patient for those long-term effects of marketing spending, and also to try to shift the thinking away from just saying marketing is a cost to really thinking about it more as marketing is an investment. And then a couple of other things that we talk about in the reports is, working one-on-one with C-suite members to explain what's going on with marketing, to go in deeper into those relationships and think about building trust in those relationships as a way to further the connection and, to basically bring those C-suite members on board with thinking about marketing in a different way, and working with the CFO as a business partner. I'm working on a piece right now that we're hoping will publish in the Harvard Business Review, and it talks a lot about these different dynamics. So look for some press releases about that as that hopefully comes to market. And this goes a little bit, again, back to Susan's question about showing the short-term and long-term impact of marketing spend. So what you see here is the green bars are short-term and the gray bars are long-term. And what you see is that marketers, about over 50% of them feel that they can prove the impact of their spend, their spend in the short term. But that number drops dramatically to 32% for the long term. So the long term is the harder of the two attribution problems to make that connection, because you might be, looking at something that happens downstream 6 months, a year, 2 years. If you think about it, when you have a strong brand, do you see those effects, always in the short term? No, you see them both in the short term, hopefully, and in the long term, as you draw more consumers in, as it facilitates customer retention, customer referrals, customer growth, all of those things. So marketers do need to be thinking about this. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the experimentation, you can use econometrics to do it and to walk through all of the different aspects of getting kind of a statistical view of this. But really, the easiest way to do it is to run the experiment. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit here on digital marketing and overall marketing spend. So this is overall marketing spend. So what you see in that box that's over to the side is that marketing spend grew by 5.2% in the last 12 months. It's expected to grow by 13.4%. So this is a big lift over the last year. And then if we compare that, and there's some breakout here by the different sectors, both in terms of the number of employees and the firm's the revenue, as well as different sectors. If we compare that to digital marketing, what we see is that digital marketing grew by about 16% in the last 12 months. It's expected to grow 15%. So digital marketing clearly is growing at a faster rate within organizations, which is why when we asked marketing leaders, what percentage of your marketing budgets are now digital, and they said 58%. So a big chunk of what's going on with marketing does involve digital these days. So just maybe one final thing. These are numbers that marketers really tend to appreciate, which is basically marketing expenses as a percent of the firm's overall revenues and marketing expenses as a percent of the firm's overall budget. And we've been tracking these over time. What you see is that you can see the numbers that we have here for the August 21 survey. These help we always ask about percentages because firms are not going to share their marketing budget dollar amounts with us, but this also puts it in context because firms that are larger, they have bigger budgets, they have more revenues, and so this kind of, again, makes things a little bit more equivalent across firms of different sizes. So this might be a benchmark that would be useful to many of you. We did see this drop off in the August 21 for marketing expenses as a percent of firm revenues. My theory on that is that what happened is that marketing revenues grew at a much faster rate than marketing budgets did, in part because of what we saw earlier, that marketing budgets aren't updated that frequently. So as the economy kicked back in and revenues started to show up, that percentage dropped because it was climbing all throughout the pandemic, in part because marketing expenditures were way out in front of revenues. So I think we'll see an adjustment on this and a return to something closer to what we had before. Although we are getting fairly close to that, my guess is it'll get closer to more that 10% range. Okay, let me just show you one thing on metrics, and then I'll jump over to maybe some of the marketing leadership. So when we asked about, I talked earlier about metrics, but this shows basically that marketers, when we ask them to what degree do you use metrics to evaluate the impact of marketing actions, the biggest sources are there on the bottom. So impact of sales or sales lift, also engagement, so some kind of digital engagement. What we don't see though are other types of measures of customer lifetime value, brand equity, even satisfaction or NPS. These are numbers that are often used as a way to gauge the effect of marketing on these intangibles that are really important. They're important because we know they affect the value of the company in the long run because they just do. That strong brands and strong customer relationships have this long-term effect for the organization. So I think there's an opportunity to increase the percent of those measuring more of these intangible aspects. Okay, and then on growth, we've asked this question a few times. I show you three of the results here in terms of the importance of different factors for growth. You can see that having the right talent is the strongest. It's shown up as the strongest in several of the surveys. It really tops things off in this survey, in part because perhaps of this great resignation that people realize the importance of having the right talent. But I think it's important to realize that it's much more important than having the right technology or the right data. And so I think that's important to realize. And then maybe I'll save this because there's a lot of detail here, but we do ask about a set of behaviors that marketers engage in. And I put the percentages here to see sort of what marketers are doing well, like connecting the growth opportunity to the position and strategy of the firm. Using an integrated digital and non-digital team. But there's also areas where marketing is not doing very well at all. And I just want to point to the one at the very bottom in the last column, which is using an integrated marketing team in which marketing and finance experts work together. That seems to be a big opportunity emerging from this set of results. Okay, so just point out a few things. This shows you what marketers are doing within organizations. And just to put this in perspective, we see a lot of green in these boxes under August 21. What that means is that marketers were given more responsibility. And this result coincides with the fact that in, I think, the previous survey, we asked marketers, to what degree has marketing become more or less or stayed the same in terms of importance? 73% said that marketing had become more important. And so I think these numbers that you see here really do reflect that. And part of that importance is that marketing is also having a bigger impact on what I would call these, we call in academia, we call kind of the upper echelons, that seat at tables. So when we ask, for example, how often is the senior marketing leader asked by the CEO or the CFO to participate in board meetings or earnings calls, which in publicly held companies are, these major leadership opportunities. I think most people would have expected these numbers to be much lower. So if you look at the graph, you can see that almost 43% of companies say all the time marketers are involved, but the average is still very high at 4.9 for board meetings. It's a little lower on earnings calls, but nevertheless, these numbers are very healthy for marketers and appear to suggest that they are playing this more important role. So let me just finish here by looking at some of these issues related to managing DE&I in marketing. This is, of course, a topic that's become incredibly important here at the school, in society, long overdue, in my opinion. And so we asked a few questions about this. And one was basically, by what percent has marketing spending changed on DE&I changed in the last year? And so what you can see here is that it grew by 10.6% in the last year. That's bigger than the number that we report for February 2021. But the point is that that's a lot of money that's being spent now on DE&I that wasn't being spent before. And as you can see, as you look down at the graphs, the larger companies are spending more, as are B2C companies, B2C product companies in particular. So what are they spending it on? In the prior survey, in the February 21 survey, when we first asked these questions, it seemed, as you look at that first column, that most of the action is what I would call kind of more predominantly external. So communications topped things off. Brand was also very, very high. Training and marketing employees were in there as well. But what's interesting, and so I think that was probably marketers trying to figure out how to bring an external face of the organization, more of a DEI face to the organization. But what's interesting is if you look in the change in August 21, we see these other strategic, more internal strategic marketing activities also seeing lift. And seeing a lift, a bigger lift than we see in this survey for communications and brand. So there's been a kind of an adjustment there in terms of more internal activities. And there's still work to be done though. So just two areas that I'll point to. One is that we asked about rating the degree to which your company has developed an inclusive approach to marketing decision-making. And that means basically, do you stop before you make a decision and ask about DE&I considerations? This number is still too low on a 7-point scale. It's 3.5. So we think there's opportunity here for improvement to create these kinds of activities. And the other area for improvement is that we asked, how much is your company changing its marketing strategy to reach a more diverse set of customers? Again, 7-point scale, 3.4 on average. Larger companies are doing things slightly better. B2C product companies, which tend to be more in the foreground and the vanguard of what's going on with marketing. Also, internet-based companies are doing this more, but still, most companies are still not doing enough of it. So this is an area where we could think about, as it's strategically relevant, what kinds of diversity should be part of the targeting strategy. So you might ask, given these barriers, given these limited numbers, what are the barriers? So we asked about that. And we asked them to rate their top 3 barriers. The areas that got the biggest attention are listed here at the top, that marketers actually have difficulty assessing the value of these DE&I related opportunities, meaning can they show kind of either the customer effect, the employee effect, whether it's acquisition of employees and customers or retention of them. Also, difficulty envisioning exactly what they should be doing. So these are big opportunities within your organization to help demonstrate the effect, but also figure out what needs to be done. Okay, so I think we're out of time. Let me just point to a couple things. First, if you're interested in these reports, I've listed the places where you can find those at cmosurvey.org. It's /results. Everything is there over time. If you are a marketer, a senior marketing person, or one that would benefit from the survey, I would sincerely appreciate you signing up to participate. There's a participation link there as well that you can just click through. And then when we do the survey in January, we'll include you in that survey. I always need Fuqua alumni support in pulling this off because that's the biggest challenge with running a big survey like this for 13 plus years. So let me also just go ahead and thank you all for joining us for this session. The next LinkedIn Live session will be held on Wednesday, November 3rd. And my dear friend, Sim Sitkin, who many of you have had as a professor, super interesting guy, always has something important to say. He will be presenting during that session. So please follow Fuqua on LinkedIn so that you can be alerted to these and other events. And the other thing is that if any of you have any questions that you think would be important to include on the CMO survey, you can pop those in the chat or you can send those to me directly at mormon@duke.edu. And some of the other topics that we didn't get into had to do with other aspects of marketing leadership. There's a big section on social media spend, which really looks a lot like mobile, that marketers are spending a lot more, but they're not necessarily seeing the returns. So those are big opportunities. So if your company's in that situation where you're spending more, but you're not necessarily getting the returns, it's probably time to think about some of those kind of infrastructure digital activities that involve data analytics, involve machine learning and AI to be able to really transform those dollar expenditures into performance outcomes for your company. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and close things now. Again, follow up with me if you have any comments, questions that you'd like to include in a future survey. Please sign up and participate. Okay, thank you very much.